Welcome to the Christian Music Industry Podcast, powered by ChristianMusicMarketing.com. We are here to help Christian musicians, songwriters, and artists connect with one another, learn from one another, and to pull back the curtain to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the Christian music industry. Let's get started.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Wisdom Moon, and your friend in the Christian music industry. And I'm excited to have a new friend join me on this podcast, James. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to butcher your last name, which is sad if I do, but I never know how people pronounce their Korean last name or first name or whatever in English, So
sure.
I'm going with Paek. Is that right?
Got it.
How do you do it?
Paek. Yeah. Paek.
Okay.
Yep, that's exactly right. You got it.
Cool. Yeah, I love that you don't have the most popular last name like Kim. I don't have a popular last name either.
Yeah.
James, I'm really excited to have you, on this podcast because I love the fact that you are also Asian American, just like I am, and there aren't that many of us in Christian music or even just in church ministry in general. I feel like outside of the actual Asian American churches or, just specifically Asian churches. So I love that you're starting to make some waves in Christian music, and you've been on a pretty popular TV show even. So I'd love to hear about some of that stuff.
Sure. Whatever you want to ask.
James is a pastor, artist, and design researcher. I don't know what that really means, so we'll find out.
Yeah, great.
He's been in ministry for over 15 years at Willow, CCV, and James has a phenomenal voice. So if you haven't listened to his music, check it out. But I want to dive into, first of all, what is a design researcher?
Yeah, so I think often people think about design and think of visual design or graphic design, but there's actually this whole other aspect of design that's kind of housed in any company that has an innovative practice. So if you think of Google or Meta or any of those tech companies, anybody that's developing an application or SaaS platform, oftentimes they'll use design in a different aspect, and it's not just what it looks like, but how it works. And so a design researcher often is using the mindset and methodology and toolkits of design to understand users of certain products, and then hopefully utilizing the learnings from these different ways of knowing your user to design products. And so that's it's a mixture of ethnographics work and ideation work and collaborative co-creative work to really find solutions to problems and creating products and services based off of the user and centered around the user versus siloed away from them. So that's kind of the overarching.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Is this something you went to school for?
Yeah, so I actually did I've been in ministry for 15 years, but 1 year I did an educational fellowship outside of the church, and it was all centered around design research. And so, and so I worked on a couple of really awesome projects that year, and it's something that I hold dear to this day. Yeah.
Wow. And you've done some work with Google and several other companies, organizations.
Yeah, I got to do a facilitation with a design consultancy called Sevilla that's based in Detroit for Google employees. And when I was working at Sevilla, we also did a project called Project Reform, which was using design to help reimagine the public assistance application process in the state of Michigan. So when people are applying for food stamps or cash assistance, those types of things, how do you dignify that process? And how do you make it more effective for both the citizens and caseworkers? Wow. And so it was probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever gotten to do, alongside of some of the smartest folks I've ever been in a room with. And so, it was a really, really formative space. It was this interesting year away from ministry that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. But yeah, I got to do some fun work that year. Yeah.
That's cool. Sounds like you and from looking at your music, you value collaboration, and
Yeah.
I love that because I think when we can work together with other like-minded people, even if we don't agree on everything, I think we can make something better. And there's
Mhm.
the term that goes around like we're better together, which I think is really true.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would love to hear your story of being on this show called Alter Ego and what your experience was. But first of all, maybe tell our listeners what is this show about?
Yeah, so Alter Ego aired last fall, and it aired on Fox. And so if you've watched The Masked Singer, it's similar in concept, and it's
Mm,
actually was an iteration of that show. And so it's a singing competition, but each singer has an AR VR avatar that performs for them on stage. And so you only get seen by the judges and the audience, which we did have a live in studio audience, when you get eliminated. Uh, the
mm,
whole competition is you're actually co-creating and playing your avatar in front of the judges and the audience and singing as that person. And so the whole idea was giving people an opportunity to like create an artist persona that they always dreamed of, and then being able to kind of create that in the AR VR space. And there was actually singing though. Like people think that because of that, there was like a lot of like post production, but we were actually in mocap studio suits, which are like these. If you've ever
oh
watched like
man,
a behind the scenes of like a video game making or Marvel movie, it's like these
yeah.
skin tight suits, which is like really embarrassing for me, who's like not buff at all. And they have all these like motion detectors and um, in real time we're puppeting our avatar and in the stage in a sound studio room, and that's being streamed to the live studio audience and the judges, and we're actually singing, so we're having to like wear a helmet and a camera that gives us an ability to puppet the face, and
Yeah.
then we also have a mic, and then we have our mocap suit, and we're moving around, and so it was a wild experience to say the least.
Wow,
But it was so
man.
fun. It was an unbelievable experience. I'm really really grateful for it. Yeah.
So how was that process like to actually apply, I guess, to be part of the show? And also, why did you want to be on the show?
Well, interestingly, I didn't reach out to the show. The show
Oh,
reached out to me. So
oh wow.
I think somehow, a lot of these shows have casting agencies that will like
Mm,
scour the internet and TikToks and people's profiles and YouTube videos to like see who they might want to reach out to. And so I
yeah.
think that's how they found me.
Oh
I
wow.
was in a band called Kylan Road for a long time that did
Mm.
YouTube cover videos, and so I would imagine that they somehow found out and then they reached out. And
Huh.
so, I mean, they reached out and they couldn't tell me what the show was. They couldn't tell me what network it was on because it's the pilot season. And they sent me this application, and it was like maybe like 10 pages long. And so I didn't do it, to be honest, because I was like, I can't be bothered. I don't really care. Um, but luckily, I got a call. They were pretty persistent. They called a couple weeks later and said, "Hey, we'd love to have you. So please fill out the application." So I did, and the rest is kind of history. Yeah, I mean, I
Wow.
had just left a church situation at the end of 2020 that was really, really tough. I needed a
Mm,
break. Um, it was a lot of things,
mm,
good and disappointing and exhausting.
yeah.
But all in all, I needed a break and knew that I was going to take a couple months off. And this email came at the top of that break. So I was just like,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
man, I don't know what I'm going to do this year. Like, I'll give it a shot. And um,
Wow.
and it's probably been one of the funnest experiences I've had in a long time. Yeah, it was good.
Wow. So, how has being on that show? Because I always imagine like people that are on these singing shows or talent
Yeah.
shows, especially if they go pretty far in it, that it pretty much like could change your life, right?
hmm
So, how has the show changed your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, to be honest, because it wasn't. Like I know some shows like American Idol, if you go really far, like your social media numbers soar and like
Mm,
all and you get a ton of media and ton of things. And I did get some of that, but if I was going to compare it to like other people's journeys, I probably didn't get the same. And so, um, but it's one of those things where like you now kind of have on your resume this that you've like sang in front of like millions of people on network television,
mm,
and so I think
yeah.
it's kind of like there might not be a direct line in terms of like how that affected my career or my life, but I think kind of indirectly and probably in a lot of ways, and obviously gave me a new confidence. I never thought that that was going to be something that I did, and I
Yeah.
had a ton of fun doing it. So, I think you meet really cool people, you have some exposure, and I went on to the show actually as a pastor. Like,
Oh,
well, that was
wow.
like part of my story was that I was a pastor, and I was just like trying to do something fun with music. And so I think more than anything, the show gave me an opportunity to talk about a couple of things. It's like a little bit of my life story, but the
Mm,
big part for me was really being able to talk about the fact that I grew up as an Asian American in a time where there weren't a lot of Asian Americans in the music industry, both in the church, outside of the church, on the radio, anywhere, and how much of an effect that had on me,
mhm.
and how um, so badly I wanted to see more equity in this space and more representation in the space. And so I think the opportunity to tell that
Yeah.
story was really cool. And I think there's a lot of people that resonated with that part.
Yeah. So how did you get into singing? And, obviously, like at some point you discovered you have a voice, and,
Yeah.
people think you have a good voice, and people want you to want to hear you sing.
Yeah.
Like, how did you first, I guess, get into singing? And then when did you kind of discover, oh, like maybe I could sing for a living kind of thing?
Yeah. That's a great question. I started young. My mom's a piano teacher. And so I, was surrounded by music growing up. And I think you just started singing in church. I started singing
Mm,
and recognized that I had some of a voice because I would, kind of get the solos once in a while. And then that happened more often. And then I started singing at school, and I think for me, you know, um, music kind of became a safe space where like I could sing both at home and at church and at school, and I
mm,
would kind of receive some affirmation. And that wasn't true in any other kind of sense of my identity. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
because I grew up Korean at home, American at school, and then at church, I was a PK, a pastor's kid. So like identity wise, I was like, who am I? What am I trying to do? And I couldn't
Yeah.
at in the time. I can probably now evaluate that with a little more thoughtfulness, but at the time I just didn't know. But singing was something that in every space I got the same affirmation. And so I think I just like leaned into it
Mm,
even harder because I think it felt like that thing that was consistent out of all the things that like, hey, at home I kind of had to change my behavior this way, at school I had to change my behavior this way, at church I had to change my behavior another way. But when I was singing, I was
yeah.
doing the same thing in every space. And so I just
Mm,
started singing. I started leaning into it. I did um, school choir stuff, I did musical stuff, I did worship stuff, I did church choir stuff. And in university, I did a lot of really cool things. I went to UCLA, and so they had this thing called Spring Sing, and it's like a school-wide talent show, and like you have to audition to
mm,
get to that. And so our group made it. I wrote a song and sang it. I did this thing called Korean Culture Night, where that year they sold out both the Dorothy Chandler Theater and the Murphy Hall Theater, and did the show
wow.
twice. It was a musical. And so and then I started singing at church more consistently. And um, in that time, really, it wasn't so much about the music. It was more about like how my music connected with my faith.
Mm,
And I got a job offer in the middle of my college years, serving at this church, and said, hey, we'd love for you to come and do ministry, particularly music ministry, but also ministry at large. And so when I graduated university, I had an opportunity waiting for me, and I went for it. Yeah. And so,
wow.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
So, one thing that I'm really passionate about, as somebody that works in the Christian music industry, and I've been kind of around it and seen it and been a part of it and have a lot of friends in it for the past 15, 16 years now. And one thing I've really noticed is there aren't that many people that look like me,
Yeah. Yeah.
like ethnicity wise. And, I've had a lot of conversations about that. Uh, and to see like your Start Again song that came up when you released it on New Music Friday Christian, I saw it and I was like, immediately it caught my attention,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I have been connected with you through a mutual friend, so I was kind of aware of you, and we DM'd a couple of times. So I was like really excited to see your music being featured on that
Yeah.
playlist. So what has been your experience, I guess, especially in the Christian music industry, and what have you observed so far?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, so most of my experiences in church, it was writing for church. It was writing particularly worship stuff. Um,
Mm,
and I love that. And I think for me, of course, there was like a part of me that would have loved to like seen that have like a really wide reach. But
mm,
for whatever reason, had a grace to know like as long as this is like blessing the community that I'm writing for, like that's the game for me, you
yeah.
know. Um, I was in a band, and I also was like like a songwriter in the industry, just like at large
Mm,
for a season, but particularly in the secular industry. I had management. I was going out like during the day I was doing ministry, and at night I was in studios in LA, like writing tunes for people who wanted to be pop stars and like
wow.
pitching songs and doing things like that. And so I kind of got a taste of
Wow.
what that could be like, and it's tough. It's a tough world. I think music in general
Mm,
is just a really really hard industry. It's not an easy
yeah.
space to be in. To make music, I mean, and to make a living off of that music is a, I think it's kind of a mystery in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and different people go about it different ways. Um, Start Again and Exodus, and then the latest song that I just released, Young. It's a part of a project that I feel like is completely new for me, and that's like writing songs just from like who I am as a person. Like, um,
Mm,
I had again just gotten out of a church situation that was really really rough, and wanted to just write to like kind of decompress and like reflect on what had just happened. And I initially thought I
mm,
was going to write a worship record because that's the
yeah.
world I came from, but something different came out. And
Mm,
I really feel like it was a God thing that like I got connected back with an old friend named James Krausse, who is, an incredible producer, but also like Grammy Award nominated like mixing master guy. And then he brought
mm,
his friend in, Tyler Chester, who's produced for like Jon Foreman and Madison Cunningham and Sarah Bareilles, and they just got around the project. And
mm,
it was probably the the most rewarding musical experience I've ever had. It was We really did not care at all, who was going to listen to it. Um,
yeah.
we weren't making decisions based off of like, is this going to hit radio or is this going to hit a certain genre? Like, I honestly just thought that this was going to be for me and then friends and family.
Mm,
And we made it so that I could heal. Really, like I gave myself a
mm,
chance to make music to heal and to reflect and to process, a bunch of things that I had gone through at this church experience, but even before the church experience. And and then we made these records and they were just living in a Dropbox, like, and we didn't know what we are gonna do. Um, but it was at that time that I had made a connection with a man named Malcolm Duplessis, who is a really big part of a crew called Common Hymnal. And he had heard some of the records, and through a series of conversations said, "Hey, I'd love to help you, get these
mm,
songs out to a wider audience." And so I said, "Sure." And that's how then the songs have gotten some, I think, attention from playlists and
mm,
um, both on Apple and Spotify. And I think for me, like really, that's my experience in the industry. I've done co-writing sessions. I've gone to writing camps for the worship space, and that's not the stuff that hit, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
for me, it was me getting into a room with two guys that I loved and trusted to make music, and really challenge myself to get honest. And I'm actually really
Mm.
surprised, to be honest, that it's getting attention. Like I thought, again, it would be a friends and family release, have a couple thousand plays maximum,
Mm.
and it's been cool to see how the songs have hit folks, people that I know, people that I don't know. I'm getting emails from people that I don't know asking me questions about the songs, and I don't even know what to tell them, because some of the stuff that I'm writing about is so private to me. It's like the song is the
Yeah.
answer. Like that's all I want to say. But it's been really cool to see people kind of resonate with that, because I think it goes back to the adage of like, if you if we can just get honest, I think people want the honesty. I think
Mm.
people can resonate with real. I think especially
Mm.
in a world where like there is a lot of messaging out there on all spaces, like, and we don't know exactly what to believe. I think most of us have this like sixth sense of like what authenticity is. And so
Mm.
if we can just get real with their songwriting, get real with their music, and then maybe it has a place. And so for me, that's been true,
Yeah.
and I'm really grateful that that's
Uh,
been true. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. One way, actually, you actually used the word already, but one way was going to describe your music is really honest and raw.
Mm,
And I think that really connects with people. And I think that that's what makes certain songs stand out to me, at least when I hear it.
mm,
It's like, wow, they just like put all of their heart into this,
yeah.
and they didn't hold back. They didn't write for radio, and I think that really speaks a lot about you as an artist, and the fact that like you want these songs to really like resonate with people. And it's hard to do that in the worship song approach, because worship song is like you're trying to make it so that people can all relate to it and sing along with it. um, but I do think what you're writing is an expression of worship, maybe not congregational worship,
Hmm.
but I love that we can really showcase different expressions of worship in the body of Christ. And I love the fact that we're doing this interview during May, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
AAPI Heritage Month,
Yep.
which is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And obviously, there's been a lot going on in the past couple of years with the racial tension in our country, and some of it has been Asian Americans being affected by it. And I know just it breaks the heart of God, because that's not God's desire that we have tension between people because of our color or our ethnic backgrounds. So when you think about just like what our as a nation, we've been going through it with racial tension,
Yeah.
and you being somebody that is expressing your heart through music. What are some things that have been, maybe stirring in your heart that maybe you've been wrestling with or having conversations about?
Yeah. That's a great question. I appreciate the space to answer it. I think one of the things that like has become so important to me is actually being really proud of the skin that God put me in,
Mm.
that there's dignity in my heritage, that it is a blessing. It's for me and not against me. Um, when I grew up, not having anybody that looked like me on stages, in leadership, even in worship records, to be honest,
Mm.
and then having a dream and feeling like I was built to contribute to that space, that rub was tough. I was told
Mm.
even that like if I didn't have a white bandmate, that I would never make it.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Jeez.
and I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I think at the end of the day is when we look on, you know, to those places, and we say things like, these places are um, global in their reach, and welcoming all people, or and then on stage you only see certain ethnicities represented, then I think that there's a little bit
Mm,
of a there's a miss there, 100%. And it
yeah.
and it's a miss that, like, for me, I had to go through years of therapy to
Mm,
try to consider, because what happened for me, at least, and I'm getting really vulnerable here, is I felt like God had built me to do something, but put me in a skin that wouldn't allow me to enter into those spaces. And so then I
wow.
got mad at God. But that's a lie.
Mm,
And it took therapy and healing and prayer and loving community, brothers and sisters of all different ethnicities coming around me and loving me, for me to realize that, like, that was a lie. But there
mm,
are some spaces where that is true. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
Like, or I think we would see more Asian brothers and sisters in those spaces. And so
yeah.
for me, I think um, it's the journey of, like, being really proud of who I am, because there was a season where I wanted so badly to be a part of a music community that I didn't see myself in, that I was not proud of my heritage,
Mm,
that I started to loathe that part of who I was. And when I think about that, it's like, man, how backwards is that? Particularly in the fact, like, when
mm,
we understand the fact that we're, like, wonderfully and beautifully made, how backwards is that type of thinking? And really kind of think part of the work that I want to do for the rest of my life is to, how do we make this place more representative, this space of music more representative, so that when kids are growing up, like your kids and my kids, and
yeah.
Asian kids are going, like, they don't even have a second thought when it comes to the fact that they can be in those spaces, and that
Yeah.
their heritage is not a hindrance at all in joining those spaces and
Mm,
entering in. And so it's funny because like, my face is on all of my album art, and that was, like, a very
mm,
intentional decision.
mm,
Um, I wanted people to see an Asian face on those records. I
yeah.
didn't want them to listen to it and not know that there was an like, I wanted them to know that there was an Asian American behind making this music.
Mm,
I don't feel that pressure for the rest of my life, because
yeah.
honestly, I'm not a model, like, I don't, like, I'm not trying, but even that want, that pressure, man, for future generation, not to not feel that at all, to just not feel
Mm,
like this pressure to put that, because for me, like you said, like, I don't, to this day, particularly I think in Christian music, I don't see a lot of Asian Americans in that space. And I
yeah.
think there are things, again, we're not a monolith in our experience. We have a lot of different things that we've experiences that are unique to each person, but there are shared experiences among the Asian American community. And I think that there are things that, like, because we're in our skin, we actually have an empathy with Jesus that is, like, really
Mm,
beautiful and awesome. So, like, for instance, like, a lot of Asian Americans that I talk to, that grew up, like, second generation Korean American or Asian American, this idea of, like, finding home is really difficult, because
yeah.
at home we were expected to be Korean, but we grew up in spaces where we're expected to be Americans. So, like, finding where we belonged and finding
Mm,
home. And I used to think that that was such a detriment, until I remember talking to a pastor who said, like, um, well, Jesus never had a home here either on earth.
mm,
He said, heaven is my home. And so
yeah.
he was also a man that was 100% God, had this kingdom culture inside of him, but was expected and spoke the language of human culture. And he had to
Mm,
navigate, I think, that pain point as well. And so we
yeah.
actually have this really beautiful kinship with our Savior, just because we're in our skin, because we
Mm,
have this lived experience. And what would happen if we would allow, like, Asian American songwriters to write worship music from that space? um,
mm,
from that lived experience, I actually think that's a gift to the church at large, And so
yeah.
I'm excited, because I do feel like things are slowly changing. Um, to see more
Mm,
Asian American voices at the table, because I think our stories matter, and I think our stories can be a gift not only to each other in our community, but also to those who come alongside of us and who we're in community with, you know?
Hmm.
And that's what I'm excited to see. And I hope to see way more of, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. It's funny
Yeah.
because, most people have the stereotype of like Asians are really great at math and they're super smart, like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm definitely not good at math. And
I'm good at math.
yeah, yeah. And like I mean, our parents have this expectation that we're gonna get straight A's, we're gonna go to the most prestigious school possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I see these, the next generation of Asian Americans that are, growing up, they so many of them love music, they're super creative, but like, where's the model for them to go, oh, I don't have to go the route of doctor, lawyer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that those things are
Totally.
bad,
Yeah.
but not, every Asian American maybe is supposed to do that. Maybe they're supposed to be in a more creative space, in Hollywood or in the music industry. So yeah, I really love the fact that, we're starting to see more and more of that, even in just mainstream like Hollywood too. Um, so when you think about like your your journey right now as an artist, songwriter, and pastor, what's something that maybe you could share with somebody, kind of like what you're talking about of maybe wrestling with that of going like, well, I think I'm supposed to maybe pursue the
Yeah.
arts, whatever the arts might be for them, but maybe they feel this like imposter syndrome, or they feel like they don't fit in. What would you say to that person?
Yeah. It's a great question. I I think the thing that I would say is get really curious about where you're finding your validation when it comes to your art. Um,
Hmm.
I think some people think that like being a successful artist looks like this. And really I
Yeah.
feel like that's those are it can look like this, like where you have a lot of social media numbers and you have millions of streams and you have sold out concerts. And I think it can look like that. But I don't think it has to look like that for you to be
Hmm.
um, a good steward of like the gift that God's given you. Um,
Yeah.
so many times I think we're looking for affirmation that looks really similar to like worldly affirmation.
Yeah.
But like God is really clear that like he doesn't work in that economy. He works very
Hmm.
differently. Like you can have all those things and actually still be really torn up and messed up inside. And what good is it, to be honest?
Yeah.
He's so much more concerned about integrity. He's in so much more concerned about like who we are and what's coming from that space. And my encouragement is like give yourself a chance to make the art that you love and
Hmm.
don't let people telling you that you can't or that it has to look a certain way and get to a certain level stop you from making that art.
Yeah.
Because for me, I think what I've realized is making the art is the win. Making the
Hmm.
thing and being on the journey of like making something that you're really, really proud of and offering it to the world, like that's the win.
Yeah.
How the world responds to it, how far it goes, I mean, that's really kind of out of most of our control. I think we can be smart about it. And I think so much of
Yeah.
what you do, Wisdom, is help people be smart about it. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, like, that type of renown, like, number one is not all that great. I've been
Hmm.
around people
Yeah.
who are that much renowned, and it's actually it's a burden, and it's not something
Yeah.
that we should like go after. Like
Yeah.
if it's thrown on you and you're supposed to hold it well, man, God bless you. We should be praying for you. Like, and for those of us who
Yeah.
don't have that, we should be grateful that we don't have that, that
Yeah.
we can live the quiet, humble life that Jesus called us to. But it doesn't mean that you can't make significant art. And I think how we
Hmm.
define significance is really important. Like give yourself a chance
Hmm.
to make the art and don't let somebody else's journey be the barometer of what your journey is supposed to be. I think that's really
Yeah.
important. And I think we're living in a day and age where, and I'm guilty of this too, where like you can grow up to become a Christian celebrity, which is wild to
Mm.
me
Yeah.
because I don't think God calls us to be celebrities. Like
Yeah.
I think God might call you to have influence. God might give you
Hmm.
some stages to stand on, but like God calls us to be humble and to be lovers of people and to be inclusive. And our art should be an extension of like this thing that God put inside of us. And so I just wish that we would take off those like socially constructed like levels of success.
Yeah.
Because if you make a record that you love and you poured into it and like you put it out, that's it. That's
Hmm.
that is the win. That is everything. And just trusting that it will find the one person or the 10 people or the, you
Mm.
know, millions of people that it's supposed to reach, like you got to just give that up. That's not yours to
Mm.
hold, you know? And so um I think for Asian Americans, I think sometimes because we have such a success model built inside of us, like this is what success looks like. You know,
Yeah.
it's like respect in society, it's monetary levels, it's whatever. We think that we have, if our art doesn't do that for us, then we're not successful. And I would just say, I don't think that's true.
Yeah. Man, that's really good. I feel like all of us should rewind that, listen to it again, 'cause that was really good. Uh,
Thanks, man.
and yeah, speaking of records, you've been releasing some singles, but you do have a project that you're getting ready to release, and it's cool just to like watch your Instagram. You're
Yeah,
working hard
thanks.
in the studio, and I mean, you're like putting in the hours, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a
trying to
lot of
do it
work.
right, which is
Have.
awesome. Yeah. So your debut solo project that's called Exit Us, which is really intriguing to me. I'm like, when I
Mm,
think about exit, like I'm thinking about like, oh, exiting the highway,
hmm.
So I love
Yeah.
the like picture that it gives me. Do you want to share anything about that? Any like tidbits that you want to give, or like any clues as to when it's coming out or anything?
Yeah, and so actually, it's it's like an EP that I'm just releasing single by single. And so
Cool.
um there's one more single to come. So there's three out of the four out, and then it'll just kind of become the Exodus EP, but it's called, there's three songs
Awesome.
out, Start Again, Exodus, and Young Love, and then one more to come. And then I was in the studio just recently, working with the same producers on just a new project just for fun. So
Sweet.
I started writing more, and actually it's been interesting because, the first project is really about me kind of uh, coming out of a season. And this
Mm,
next project is actually kind of really feels like what I'm going through right now, which is like this desert season of like
mm,
just trying to figure out what it means to have just left that season of life and
yeah.
what it means to be in this in between. And so the next project will probably be something to do with like desert. And then
Mm,
hopefully one day, when I get the chance, I'll write a project around being in the promised land. And that's like all
mm,
kind of come just like as I've been writing. And so
yeah.
um, the desert project, don't even know, like actually two out of two songs are done out of the however many will be in that project that I'm super
Mm,
in love with and I'm excited to share. Um,
awesome.
and then so we'll see. Yeah, but yeah, so like yeah, just be waiting to single by single. I think I mean you would probably know why that's probably a good
Yeah.
play, maybe not a good play, but I'm a new artist in this space, and so if I dropped a full length album, I don't think a lot of people would listen to the whole thing,
Yeah.
and so giving people like tidbits of who I am along the way. And then maybe hopefully one day I can do a whole project, but who knows? Again, the goal for me is just to write stuff that I love and that I believe in, and to release it with people that I love and believe in. And if I could do that,
Yeah.
then I think that's the win. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think single releases are a smart way to go for especially like, artists that are still like really building the fan base, building the listenership. I mean, if you're like Taylor Swift. You know, you could drop an album, go tour it for the rest of 2022 or whatever. But,
and I'm not Taylor Swift, so.
Yeah. So yeah, James, thanks so much for sharing. Really, you know, honestly about your journey. And like I've been through that desert journey, and I did not want to write about it. So I love that you're writing about it. So yeah, I appreciate your vulnerability in your music.
Yeah. And hey, Wisdom, can I just say thank you?
Yeah, I would encourage you. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to say thank you, Wisdom, for like everything that you're doing in that space. As an Asian brother, like to see you in that space and to see the amount of experience you've gained and all the work that you've done, and then to like understand like what it means to uplift other voices and to do that, like it means a ton. And it's an example to me of like, that's really cool that you are trying to hold integrity and trying to educate and trying to do the work that you're doing right now, because I feel like it's more important now than ever. And so thank you so much for being in my corner. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. And for those of you guys who aren't following James, you can head over to your favorite social media platform. Looks like he's on everything. So just look up James Paek, Paek. I love that you're on TikTok. So
yeah,
I think that's
trying.
something that artists need to be on. So
yeah.
And yeah, be sure to check out his music. Just look up James Paek, Paek. So thanks so much, James. And maybe once you have some new music out, you know, we could have another conversation.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Christian Music Industry Podcast, powered by Christian Music Marketing. To find out how we can partner with you to increase your impact and influence with integrity, please visit our website, christianmusicmarketing.com, or check us out on Instagram @Christian Music Marketing. See you next time.